Hey guys, welcome back to Nerd Continuity. I am your co-host Michael Dambold with our amazing host Alex Castellani. We have some great topics to talk about today.
Yes.
Uh, we actually had too many topics. We had to cut down the list, so there's some great stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
we are people
Alex,
with lists.
yes, we have extensive lists. Uh, So before we start,
Hmm.
let's kind of make quick mention of the Apple keynote address in the
Oh,
Apple Live event recently.
yes.
Um,
Did you watch it
yeah, well,
live?
I did, I did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oddly enough, you can watch it. You could watch it on Edge, like the Edge web browser.
Oh,
It, I don't know why, but you could. So, uh,
improvement in
yeah. So
technologies.
yeah. So what did you think about the announcements?
It was boring. My first, I was totally non-interested, and I, first of all, like now, it's been like I don't know, 4 years or 3 years that basically everything is gonna be presented. It's leaked 2 months before, like with pictures or
Yeah.
descriptions or like hardware specs of whatever is gonna be introduced. So it's kind of like okay, and I always try to stay away from spoilers and leaked footage or leaked pictures because I like the introduction of a finished product and not a work in progress. But I have to say, I don't know, it was kind of boring. It's like it looks like we talked about the other day. It looks like uh, the guys from Apple went inside the Best Buy
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, let's copy this product, this product, this product. Okay, we're done the keynote. That's I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm
What do you
pretty sure
think?
they took apart a Surface Pro and were like, let's do this, but on
Yeah,
iPad.
that's good
And
work. Yeah. But it's
yeah, and
giant. It's just massive. It's like why you have a tablet if you actually have a computer. Like
mhm,
nowadays you have all these products that they're basically the same. They have the MacBook Air, the new MacBook, the iPad Pro. They're all the same size. They're all
mhm,
13 inches. And one has a keyboard. The other one has not a physical keyboard, it has the smart cover. The other one has just one port. The other one has two USB ports. It's the same product. It's just this 13 inches display, and they keep releasing this product that they compete between each other, and
mhm.
none of those product is like a definitive one. Like every time you have to buy now an Apple product, you have to make a compromise on something, and it's
Yeah,
just it's god awful. I don't know.
yeah. I was severely disappointed. I feel like, especially the Apple Pencil,
Oh,
there's some stuff with the Apple Pencil that looked okay, but that's stuff that everyone's been doing forever. So, like they were saying, the pressure sensitive, if you do the,
yeah,
the pressure sensitive stylus. Well, I mean, Intuos has been doing that for long. Wacom has been doing that for a long time.
yeah.
And, I mean, I remember having, yeah, I don't know. It's just, there's so much stuff that they acted like, was revolutionary, but it really wasn't. And
Oh,
they really
totally.
haven't been revolutionary in a long time. I mean, if you remember that, I was actually talking to some coworkers about this. If you remember, there's a huge difference between iPhone 3 and iPhone 4. The different
Yes.
casing, all of the new stuff you could do in the OS. It was like a completely different phone. You knew you were getting a huge leap in innovation.
Hmm.
And then the 5 was not as much. The 5 was like, well, okay. So you didn't feel
Introduces
as.
like the fingerprints reading and maybe a
Mhm.
taller screen or something like that. It was kind of, yeah, improvement, but not a huge one.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and then when 6 came out, it was like, well, there really isn't much. I mean, the casing was different, but that was
Yeah.
it. And they were like, "Oh, it comes in more colors." I'm like, "No, don't do that." Like, once you start doing the colors thing, you know that you're running out of ideas.
Yeah.
Because the whole point with Steve Jobs was to say, we've got black and white, and that's it,
Hmm.
and we don't need to do a lot of colors because it's kind of like his same question of who needs a stylus. back in 2004,
Yeah.
and now they have their own. And yeah, I don't know. I just the other web developers I'm talking to, and after our conversation,
Yeah.
it just seems like they're just kind of rehashing stuff and trying to act like improvements that other people have done, especially
Yes.
Microsoft at this point. Because there was a time in about 2005 where they were years ahead of Microsoft. Microsoft was fighting to catch up, and Android was really struggling. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, Android now is better in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and Microsoft is now doing stuff that Apple is not doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Apple's on the defensive now,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is not good. It's not good for them as a company. I mean, they need to come out with some holographic iPhones very soon, to let us know that they're still on the forefront of innovation and not trying to catch up, because that's exactly what this keynote left me thinking
Yes.
last time.
Yes,
So I don't,
absolutely.
yeah. Well, and also the fact that they had two or three demonstrations of software
Yeah.
that took up a lot of time, as
Yeah.
opposed to a lot of like software, like third party software. They even had Microsoft come in and talk about stuff that you could do.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was
you
fun.
should. It's telling that you would spend a lot of your time, or a chunk of your time, doing that versus and those seeming to have more of an innovative leap
Mm-hmm.
than your hardware. And that all of your hardware changes can be neatly summed up in like two PowerPoint
Yes.
presentation
Yeah,
slideshows.
totally. It's kind of like I kind of understand what Apple is doing because uh, it's trying to be in as many fields as possible. So he doesn't want to be just for designers, but also for developers, but also for productivity, but also for I don't know, office jobs. So he's trying to integrate as much as possible, and he's trying to cover as many fields as possible. But the problem is that especially like with the iPad Pro and the Pencil, like since the first tablet, the first screen tablet with a pencil was introduced in 2000 something, 2005, 2006 by Wacom, and now we have the Surface Pro from Microsoft, and they have
Hmm.
the first like the version 2 was a collaboration with Wacom, so they have the
Yeah.
Wacom technology on that device,
Yes. Yeah.
and then we have actually the companion the companion series from Wacom that is actually a standalone computer in a tablet. So it's a
Hmm.
Linux tablet computer where you can draw with the pencil, and then it's a full computer. You can install software in there. You can do whatever you
Hmm.
want, and it's like super light and it's way better than the iPad Pro. But with all these products in all these years, there were being like known like a designer that said, okay, my workflow is entirely on screen, is entirely on the companion Wacom or on Surface Pro. Like
Yeah.
designers, graphic designers, comic book artists, they don't do everything on a tablet. They
Right.
still use pencil and paper, then they do scans, then they use vector graphic, then so like focusing so much on a pencil and try and call it Apple Pencil. It's super silly, but and trying to make it
Yeah.
like, oh, this is like a real pencil. So you have inclination, your stuff. It's something that has already been there for years, but it's
Yeah.
never been a breaking like product. It's like, oh my god, this is amazing. This is the best one because it's never gonna be exactly like pencil and paper, and professional artists know that. Like, I'm not gonna replace my workflow with an iPad Pro, with an Apple Pencil, especially because I have tons of different alternatives that are way better and way cheaper than the iPad Pro. And it's weird because I understand that they want also that piece of market there. We want to sell also to those artists. We want to sell our products to also this other part of the internet, this other part of the market. But then they leave behind innovation and they trying to catch up with everything else. So they do like multi-screen, like introduced in Linux in Ubuntu version 8.10, the multi-screen, and now they introduce it in 2015. And But on the other hand, they create a lot of issues. So they remove all the ports. They close more and more your operating system. So if you don't do the upgrade, you cannot connect anything else. You cannot like share your files between different physical devices if you don't pass through the iCloud. And it's just
Hmm.
like, it's a huge nonsense for me. It's like, I understand what you're doing, but for me, you're doing it like really wrong. And just, oh God, I don't know.
Yeah, and well, and I think that I think their problem was trying to push uh, the new iPad as a replacement for your workflow. And there's absolutely no way because I'm an illustrator and a web developer. Under no circumstances would I replace any part of my workflow with an iPad.
Yeah,
I would buy a Surface Pro. I know people who have Surface Pros and they love them because I need the computing power. I need to do
yeah,
more than just draw something and then export it through the cloud to my desktop computer. Why in the world would I do why would I take those extra steps? That's working backwards.
yeah,
To me, that's
exactly.
working backwards. That's going back to like the 2005 model
Hmm.
of saying import, 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 done,
Yeah,
instead of like the Surface Pro, which says basically you can do everything digital now, and everything I do is pretty much digital. So
yeah.
I just it doesn't make any sense to me why I would go back to the like 2005 in the way that I do things and try
Hmm.
to like basically devolve my workflow into something just to say that I'm using an iPad. I
Yeah.
mean, the problem is, before people were willing to alter their workflow because of the brand, and
Hmm.
people are no longer willing to do that. And I don't know if Apple's cognizant of that. I think I think they're banking on the brand that they can coast,
Yes.
but you can't. You cannot coast on um, your brand being
Hmm.
innovative if you stop being innovative,
Yes.
and and that's a problem. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna touch pencil. $99, man. Ninety
Yeah,
nine
it's
dollars
fucking
for a pencil.
$100. And
No,
let me
no.
ask you a question. Like, in your like daily workflow, you always and only use one device. Like, you start on your computer and you end on your computer, or sometimes like you take your phone, you take your tablet, or you draw something on a piece of paper. Like, you're stuck in just one single device all day for like an entire week.
No, it's usually multiple devices, but I need
Exactly.
stuff to, I would not. The problem is that the iPads are not. I would just be so hesitant to take an iPad anywhere because they're so expensive. And if
Hmm.
you buy, let's say you buy a new iPad at the $800 level, you can get a Surface Pro for the same price. See,
Yes.
that's the problem. This is what they're coming up against.
Hmm.
Is because you can buy a Surface Pro, you can buy a Surface for the same price, have a full computer, be able to do other things on it other than the closed iOS system. Because by the way, it's running on iOS. It's not running on the Mac OS. So
Exactly.
it's running on your phone's OS, and we all know how frustrating that can be sometimes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have an iPhone. It's great. I'm not
Hmm.
bashing Apple, but the problem is there's some serious, fundamentally flawed logic that's going on with this branding. And there's a book called The Brand Gap by Marty Neumeier,
Hmm.
and he talks about how when brands try to diversify too much, they lose their message, and when you lose your message, you fail. And
Yes.
that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing them beginning to try the be all end all. But if you're
Hmm.
going to do that, you need to do what Microsoft is doing and actually make a computer. Because we're not willing, as a developer and as an illustrator, I'm not willing to devote or depend on
Yeah.
the iOS system to carry the amount of work that I do. Because I do a lot of work. I
Yes,
do a lot of
exactly.
drawings. I have gigs and gigs. I have probably terabytes of
Hmm.
information, and I
Yeah.
don't want to trust a terabyte of information in any way, in any small part, not even a gig, to an iOS system. If
Yes.
that's actual like productive work, if that's production work for a client or for my own personal use, I'm not gonna trust it to an iOS. I would trust it to a Mac OS, but I wouldn't trust it to an iOS.
Yes,
Yeah,
totally.
I just don't trust it. And there's no way
Yeah.
you can troubleshoot it. Like even with
Exactly.
Windows, you can get in there and troubleshoot it, and there are things you can do to recover information.
Hmm.
Can't do that with an iOS, not without sending it off to the Apple Store, but that's not a guarantee that you're going to get the right person for the job.
Yeah,
So
no,
anyway, I'm
totally.
gonna go on. I could go on forever ranting about this, but yeah,
No.
unimpressed.
Just talking about like a second about the price, also, it totally doesn't make sense. The hardware improvement and the price comparison. Like,
Yeah.
for a 32 gigabytes version of the iPad Pro is like $800, $899 or something.
Yeah.
$800. And instead, for the same price, the Surface Pro, that is a more complete, more solid, and more dynamic device, is 256 gigabyte.
Yeah.
So, and if you just go to NCIX or whatever other retailer and you buy an SSD hardware, an SSD hard drive, the amount of dollar per gigabyte is way cheaper than the one that Apple is using. So they could improve the amount of space, the archiving space, like 7 times without actually spending any more dollars, like any money on that, because the cost of solid state hard drive, it dropped in the last 4 years a lot, and now they're cheaper and cheaper. But they keep releasing the iPhone as 60 gigs. That what the hell are you gonna do with 60 gigs of space? Like nothing. Like one U2 album that is gonna be forcibly put it into your iPhone. That's done.
I'm surprised they didn't do that this time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or 32 gigabyte of an iPad Pro that you want to use. Yeah, you're telling people to use this as a productivity device. So you need email space, you need pictures. You want us to use Photoshop in that device. I'm gonna have like 3 Photoshop files, and then that's it. I'm not gonna have any more space in that. That's just greedy stuff. Like, and if you see the other hardware specs, they didn't actually release a full hardware specs for the new iPad, but it's gonna be exactly the same. It's gonna be the thinnest a battery ever, the thinnest screen ever, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But you're gonna always have that crappy 12 or 8 megapixel camera. You're gonna always have that 8 hours of battery life, not improved, like always the same. You're gonna have the Apple A9X core processor that is really fast, absolutely is really fast, but it's not comparable to an i5 or an i7 from Intel that you can find in a Surface Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I hope that other web developers are, and I think they are. I mean, we had this conversation on Slack, and I've had conversations with other web developers and even IT people, and we're just kind of, I don't want to say we're laughing at it, but man, it's a little ridiculous that they think that the people are. I mean, there is always going to be a group of fans and followers that will salivate over every new Apple product.
Yeah.
Now, I used to be a huge Apple fan because their stuff was good. You know, their stuff would last a long time. Like the Apple G4 I got lasted for years and took such a beating. I mean, falling on the floor and all that stuff, and it just kept going. It just kept going and lasting, and it was great. But then I got the MacBook Pro, and then the hard drive died.
Yes.
And then I got another MacBook Pro, and the hard drive died on that. And then I got a Mac Mini, and the hard drive died on that 30 days after I bought it. And I brought it, or actually it was 28 days. I brought it in, and I said, "Can you fix this?" And they said, "Yes, we've outsourced our hard drives to Maxtor or something." And it's probably their hard drives. And I'm like, well, that's still your problem. And so I got it back, and as soon as I got it back on the 30 days, because it was after the 30 days, it died again. And so I had an absolutely useless Mac Mini. I mean, the hard drive was gone. It was completely dead. And so
my God.
I had such a bad run with Mac stuff. I mean, I have an Air now, but and it runs great, but I'm not pushing it. I don't have anything pretty much on there that isn't the standard stuff, the standard stuff that comes with it. I haven't loaded Adobe on it, and Adobe used to handle Adobe so well.
Yes.
But now I've got 2 laptops. I've got a laptop at home that I do most of my stuff on, but it's a Toshiba. You know, it's not. It's not a Mac, and I just don't feel like, personally, from where I'm at, and I know other people are doing great with Macs and they've had no problems. Now the desktop Macs have been great. Other than that Mac Mini, I have not had a problem with any desktop. But it's just, after all of my issues with Apple, I'm just not as much of a fan as I was 10 years ago. It's just, I feel like it's much less of a product than it used to be. Because that was the whole thing that we could boast in. When we were the whole Apple, when we were the Apple fanboys. You're like 10 years ago. It was like, well, their stuff lasts forever. And
Yes.
how many laptops you're going to go through, and it was worth the price to pay.
And it was actually like 10 years ago was cheaper.
Yeah.
Cheaper
Oh gosh.
than a
Yeah.
desktop computer compared in like specs
Yeah.
and yeah, and speed.
It was cheaper and it lasted longer, and it was a
Yeah.
hardy hard drive, and the CPU was solid.
Yeah, yeah.
The processors were great. I could open, I remember at one point in CS3, CS2, CS3, having gigabyte files open in InDesign and Illustrator,
Mm-hmm.
and like a 500 open, and only when I had like two gig files open in two Adobe programs did it start slowing down,
Yeah.
but it didn't die.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's how strong it was. That's how good it was for 2005. That's really good. But now, I mean, I cannot. I have to be so careful.
Yes.
In Mac, I just don't want to overtax it, and so I feel like I have to be much more careful with the Mac OS now.
Yeah, no, totally.
And that may just be me. Other people may have very powerful Mac computers that don't have a
Mm-hmm.
problem. And that's fantastic. So
Yes.
I'm never gonna say I hate Apple. I don't hate them at all. I think
No, no,
they're a
no.
great, fantastic company.
Yeah, it's not a matter like loving, hate, whatever.
Yeah,
It's a matter of like the product that I'm spending on all the
right,
money that I like
right,
I'm
right, and
sweating to make. Like
yeah,
it has to be a good product. It has to last more
mhm,
than 6 months before you release the
yes,
updated product that I
yeah.
don't care.
Well, and
And
basically has to be a good horse.
exactly.
It needs to run fast. It
Yeah.
needs to run a long time. It needs to be healthy and in good condition. And I don't want to have to replace it anytime soon.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we're in the Wild West and we're looking for a good horse, and
Exactly.
that's what it feels like. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, for anybody listening, we don't hate Apple. We're
No,
not
no.
Microsoft. I mean, it's not.
I have a MacBook.
It's
I'm
never
I'm on a
been.
MacBook right now. But I
Yeah.
am on a MacBook from 2011, and it's been super solid. I loved it, but after 6 months, my motherboard died, like the
Yeah.
motherboard. And I had to spend
Yeah.
another $900 to replace the motherboard because after you replace the motherboard, all the components that you have inside are not compatible anymore. So you have to
Yeah.
replace everything else. I was like, oh God, why? Like, never happened. I had a MacBook, the white version of the MacBook from 2008, and it still works. It like super slow because cannot handle anymore the softwares, but it still works. It's still
Yeah.
solid, and the battery is still like 5 hours.
Hmm.
So it's just, oh God.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's for anyone listening, we're not anti Apple and we're not anti Microsoft. We're just
No,
professionals dealing with the ups and downs of both brands.
exactly.
And there are good things that Apple does, and there are good things that Microsoft does, and there are bad
Yes,
things that Apple does, and there are bad things that Microsoft does. And
exactly.
so, neither is perfect, and we're not going to gush over, I'm
Hmm.
not, and I know you won't, we're
No,
not going to gush over anyone and take the stance of, well, this
totally.
company is better than the other. I think it
Yeah,
just
no.
depends on, because here's the thing, we have to do our jobs, and we have to do them quickly, and we need
Yeah,
reliable technology to
exactly.
provide that environment for us. And it doesn't matter who provides it. It doesn't matter who makes it, as long
Yeah.
as they make a good product. You know,
Yes.
and and I think that's how pretty much most developers are. I mean,
Yeah.
there's always going to be that one developer who says, "I don't touch X software or hardware or
Hmm.
OS." There I know people who are staunchly against Apple, believe it's evil, but there are people that I know that are staunchly Apple people who think Microsoft is evil, and
Hmm.
neither are the Antichrist, neither
Yeah.
are God, and just calm down.
Yeah. Just
We're professionals. Come on,
yeah,
you know,
go to your own conclusion and
yeah,
evaluate the product. And if the product is valid, just take it. That's it.
go for it.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think we're
whatever.
always looking for the best thing. The
Yeah,
fastest thing.
absolutely. Well,
But,
if you have to spend $1,000, I want a best
yeah,
thing. Like,
exactly. It's an investment. You want it to be an investment. It's like a car. You want to
mhm.
invest in something that's going to take you a long way before having to replace it or even
Yeah,
have it fixed.
yeah,
So, anyway. So, yeah, speaking of being designers and developers,
yeah.
uh, there was a fantastic link that I saw this week
Hmm.
called "What Tools Are Designers Using Today?" And
Yes.
they are the results of a huge survey. Let's see. Looks like 4,000 participants from 200 countries.
Wow.
And Koi Vin was the one who is being quoted here.
Hmm.
And Koi's amazing. Um, let's see. And it was really interesting because they asked like the favorite tools.
Hmm.
What do you use for wireframing? Um, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So let's start with you, Alex. What did you think about the site and the results?
Really interesting results. Of course, it's I love the fact that they pretty much cover the entire process, the entire creative process. So they didn't cover just what tools do you use to design or to develop. They started like
Hmm.
from brainstorming, wireframing until the end, like version control, final management, and like project management. That is, no one cares pretty much about what kind of tool do you use for project manage. I don't
Right.
care. Like I'm a developer. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But it's just basically they cover the entire process of a digital agency, and it's pretty cool. And it's kind of like nice to see a lot of different answers, but it's kind of weird seeing like Sketch pretty much on top of everything.
That was
And
yeah.
if you don't know, Sketch is like a software, is a vector based software by Bohemian Coding that is like how much? 3 years old? 2 years
Yeah.
old? It's like version 3.
Well, it's a Mac product too, which
It's
says something.
it's exactly. It's just a strictly Mac
Yeah.
product. They're
Well,
working
yeah.
on a Windows derivation, but it's not gonna be ready for at least 1 year.
Right.
And
Well,
it's
let's break these numbers down for people who haven't read it.
yeah,
Let's start with the brainstorming and ideation.
go for it.
64% of the people surveyed
Mm-hmm.
said that they use pencil and paper
Mm-hmm.
to begin their idea process.
Yeah.
Um, which is, I mean, that's pretty basic.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of like I don't know if in this 64% it's also included like whiteboard with markers, but probably it is because I think it's kind of the same.
yeah, I think we could probably
Yeah.
include that. That makes sense because if you're working in a place with a bunch of whiteboards, then yeah,
Hmm.
that's it's usually
And it
like writing
makes
your
sense
idea.
like this huge percentage because also like you when you create a product, something new, and you have to sketch something super fast, you're it's kind of like sometimes it's annoying being constricted by the frame of a software.
Hmm.
You actually need a white space. You need a
Yeah,
piece of paper without boundaries, and you need just to draw. So
yeah. Well, and I think the idea of sketching, because I mean, there's a huge jump. 64% answered with pencil and paper, but
mhm.
10%, which is the next number down, use Sketch.
Yeah.
So there's a huge, I mean, there's an enormous gap here. It's not like
Yes.
50-50. I mean, we're talking 64, 10%, and then
Yes.
7% Illustrator, 7% Photoshop, 6% other on the way down.
Yeah.
But there's an enormous gap here between people who use pencil and paper to sketch out their ideas and um, people who actually use some kind of software.
Yeah. Exactly.
And which makes me wonder if some people are more development project oriented, task
Hmm.
oriented,
Yeah.
who do that, who would use Sketch because that means you already kind of know what you're doing. My
Yeah.
opinion is if you go into software and you start using that software for sketching, quote unquote, that
Hmm.
you already know what you're doing.
Yes.
Not you're actually trying to do the word bubbles,
Hmm.
trying to figure out you know what works and what doesn't. So, and the next one was wireframing. Um, so, what is your primary tool for wireframing? This is where it gets interesting that we were talking about.
Yes.
27% answered that they use Sketch for
Hmm.
a wireframing, which is a pretty huge number. 19% said Illustrator, and then 14% said HTML and CSS.
Hmm.
And so through this, we're going to talk about just probably the top three. I think, if you agree, I
Yeah.
think that's
Or do you
probably
want to talk about the 2% of Keynote
Oh yeah, 2%
Who the
people use.
hell? How the hell?
That's funny. Yeah,
What?
and that's about 8% that uses none. So,
Yeah, none. I
so
don't do
that's
wireframing.
like more people use nothing than InDesign and Keynote. Which I don't know why you even use.
Yes.
InDesign is not for wireframing. Why would you do that? InDesign is
Ah,
for print publication. I used to do that.
they don't know that. Well, it's
Yeah, I
okay.
guess not. But that was interesting that
Mhm.
27% uses Sketch. That
Yeah.
also means that entire 27% uses Mac.
Yes.
So I thought it was really interesting the connection between Mac users and those responding for these digital agencies.
Yes, that's something like kind of related to what we were saying before, that you need a product that is reliable and it works. And Macs and Apple used to be like that. So in my digital agency, like we are a medium-sized digital agency, and we all have Macs, but not the latest iMac from 2015 that is super flat and you don't have a digital drive reader and you have just three ports and you cannot do any. We have all 2011
Mm-hmm.
Mac iMac and Mac Pro we that we manually expanded. So we have like 16 gigs of RAM. We expanded the hard drive. So we improved those kind of Macs, and those are great. Like they work perfectly, and I think most of the digital agency, like the majority of the digital agencies, are still on Mac
Yeah.
with older software. Sorry, with older hardware, but still
Yeah.
on Mac. That's why I think Sketch is like
Well,
skyrocketing these.
yeah. Well, and also 38% of these people who answered was Sketch,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. Let's see. Startups
Yes.
38%, and technology firms were 35%. But that's not telling us more detailed information, like you were saying. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
if these startups were using older technology instead of using an investment to buy new tech? What if they were
Yes.
buying these older computers, which actually makes more sense,
Mm-hmm.
business-wise, is to get an older computer, manually upgrade it, and then
Mm-hmm.
have more powerful stuff than having less ports and less usability. You know. Than
Yes,
that. And
exactly.
so, but even
Mm-hmm.
then, like 23% says studio agency,
Yeah.
and it was equal with the media agency at 23%. And so,
Yes.
um, that was really interesting. And then HTML and CSS was a little ridiculous. Um, I don't even want to go there because
Who
that
wants
that
to
to me
wireframe?
is why would you even do, I don't know. I'm sure there's some people out there that's their thing, but
Yeah, the cool thing about Sketch that I also use it to wireframe sometime is
mhm.
that if you want to do a fast wireframe prototype, you can export the single elements from Sketch in CSS. You just convert it CSS. It's going to create a kind of a super crappy CSS derivation, and HTML is just horrible. But if you need to do a super quick, fast wireframe prototype in HTML, you can export your sketch file in HTML and it's gonna work. And it's just
Mhm.
like pretty basic. But that's one of the strengths of Sketch. And the other strength of Sketch is just it's fast. It's like stupid fast. It's like so light. It's like how much is that? 400 megabytes of program or software.
Yeah.
You can do everything you can do in Illustrator. You can do like something like way more focused on web, and it's just
Mhm.
really fast. It's not gonna destroy your memory. It's not gonna crash your computer, and you can have multiple artboards, multiple file open. It's just fast. It's just
Yeah. And that also moves into, and I really believe it should be connected to interface design.
mm-hmm.
34% said that they use Sketch, and 29%
Yes.
said they use Photoshop. And so, and then HTML, CSS again.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but it's the same thing. It's like these same people are using Sketch for the majority of their planning process,
Yeah.
and then moving on to, which is basically kind of what the rest of us do. But, what I tend to do is I was taught in college to use Illustrator and how to use Illustrator as a productive tool.
Yes.
And most of the people that come to me and say I don't understand Illustrator is people who are not trained to use it.
Yes.
It's usually people who they got a copy of it and they don't know how it works.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to set up Illustrator to be an enlightening, fast, productive tool.
Yes.
Because Illustrator has not become bloated over the years like Photoshop has.
Yes.
So I have Illustrator on all every computer that I have it,
Hmm.
specifically set up with presets, windows, workspaces, everything to let me be able to kind of move through the process lightning fast.
Yeah.
And I get sketches out like that. One thing that I've always been able to do is just get out mockups very quickly
Yeah.
because I know all of the hotkeys. I know all of the ways to do it. Like
Hmm.
once you're like professionally trained in Illustrator, it's really easy.
Yeah.
Um, but Sketch is actually like a lighter version of Illustrator. So
Yeah.
all of the people that are saying that what they're doing in Sketch, you can do in Illustrator too. But if your
Hmm.
company doesn't want to or doesn't have the time or investment to either train you or buy Adobe software, then Sketch
Hmm.
is a good alternative. There's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that. You just basically whatever works.
Yeah.
So,
And the
there's
the interesting thing also about like compared to the wireframing process with this interface design is that after Sketch in the wireframe was Illustrator. That totally makes sense. But
yeah,
here in the interface design after Sketch, that's Photoshop. So like
yeah,
majority of these people, like developers and design, and I used to do that too. Like you do wireframes in Illustrator, then you import in Photoshop, and you do interface design in Photoshop. So
yeah,
the strength of Sketch is basically you have the ability to remain in the same environment, in the same software,
hmm
and do both wireframe and interface design because you have all the tools that you need to convert your wireframe into a proper design.
yeah,
Instead, sometimes you're forced to switch to Photoshop to do
yeah.
some more complex and advanced interface design.
Which makes me wonder if in the future Adobe's going to end up. I've always wondered about the future of Illustrator.
Yeah.
If Adobe is going to eventually just cut it and then cut it in half and then spread its
Yeah.
abilities over like two other products, bloating down Photoshop even more.
Oh my
But
god.
I just wondered. I hope
Well,
not. I really hope not. But um,
Photoshop already has like the vector section with shapes and stuff, but it's just horrible. It's just like
yeah,
it's like managing more than 10 shapes in Photoshop is just
it's
it's
ridiculous. Yeah,
yes.
I don't the really complex stuff that people do in Photoshop. I just wonder, like half of it. I mean, you can even like build it in Illustrator and then import half of that into Photoshop, so you don't kill your computer trying
Yeah.
to do all of that. There's like
Hmm.
certain elements you can create an Illustrator, flatten, and then bring into Photoshop as a flattened layer, than to do
Yeah.
all these different shapes in Photoshop and then flatten it. Why? It's just to me, it's faster to move between the two. But
Yeah. I would
anyway,
like to
um,
to stay like 2 more seconds just to
sure.
let you notice that InDesign is always present in every process.
I
From
know.
wireframe to interface design in
Who
InDesign
are
is
these
just
people? What
great.
country are these people from?
And did you notice there's fireworks there?
Yes, I did.
2%.
I'm ignored. I don't talk about. I don't want to
But
talk
it's
about fireworks.
interesting because like fireworks was dropped in version CS6. So it means
Yeah,
like how many of these
yeah.
people are using the latest version of Adobe? Like
Well,
how
it
many
makes
of
yeah.
these companies are still on CS4, CS5 because they cannot upgrade because it's too expensive. So they just spend one time in a lifetime $100 for Sketch, and they
Yeah.
have like lifetime updates, upgrades, and they have everything. So
hmm
that is connected to the episode that we did about Adobe and like the
Yes.
cost of the upgrade. So Adobe with this like thing with this like new marketing system and this new
hmm
business idea is pushing people away. That's why Sketch is getting more and
Bigger.
more
Yeah.
yeah audience. So it's freaking like who the hell uses still fireworks like
I
oh
know.
God.
Yeah. I've experienced some people who do.
Why?
That's
It's
all I'm
like
gonna say.
they hate
Well,
each other. They hate themselves. Like
I don't want to be too
yes.
specific, but I believe the logic was this is just as good as Photoshop.
Oh.
I will say that without comment. That's all I'm
Okay.
gonna say. I staunchly disagree with it. I don't believe that has any sort of educated. I don't believe that's an educated opinion.
Yeah.
I really do not believe that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. Um, So anyway, but I think it's
Nice.
interesting. That's exactly what you're saying. I
Yeah.
think most of these companies, I think we're beginning to get the picture now of people of design companies not necessarily running with Photoshop and
Mm-hmm.
Illustrator and Adobe products anymore. Now there will always be companies who do.
Yeah.
Like any kind of print and publishing design, you have to use Adobe. It is the best thing out there.
Absolutely.
We don't have Quark anymore. Quark is not usable. You just don't do it. You just
Yes.
don't do it. Adobe has everything you need. I when I'm creating the books that I'm creating right now for my comics, it's
Yeah.
all in InDesign
Yeah.
because you just do. You
Yeah.
just do. That's what it's made for. Adobe is very print friendly. It always has
Yes.
been, but it's getting a little slow to catch up to the web.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we still have Dreamweaver in the state that it's in is still, Dreamweaver's good, but
Mm-hmm.
there's other stuff that can do there's other stuff that can work better, and
Yes.
it's not as bloated. Most of the coding that I do, I use Sublime Text.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great for me. And everyone
Yes.
has their own like thing. The big fear when I started web development is am I using the right development software?
Yes.
And there really is no answer to that because it's basically the question people ask is not what software are you using, it's what can you do, what languages do you know, and how can you make this happen.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter which software
Yeah.
it's on your rooster. If the product and the final product, it's always the same and it's a
Yeah.
good product, you can do whatever you want. It's up to you to find the right process for you that you feel comfortable and it just helps you.
Yeah, and it's all about you developing a process that makes you fast and good.
Exactly.
And I really don't, there. I mean, I don't, and kind of going back to fireworks, I don't believe fireworks makes you fast or good. I
Hmm.
believe Firefox is a handicap, because and Adobe is no longer supporting it. So
Yeah.
we're done with that. So guys, come on, man. If you're using Fireworks,
Come on, man.
stop,
This two
man.
percent. I'm sorry for you
Yeah,
guys, but
just get like
stop.
if you have a Mac, put in the money, get Sketch, and then like you're
Yeah.
boom right on the front. You're on the cutting edge again, and you're good.
Yes.
And people are gonna look at you funny when you're at a conference and go, "I use Fireworks," because they're like, "Really? What's wrong?"
It's
Like what's
okay.
wrong with you?
What's up in your
So
life that
yeah, you okay? Do you need an intervention? Um, that's all I'm gonna say. Sorry, I just
that's okay.
there's leeway whenever you're using software, but there are limits though.
Yes.
I mean, if you're saying you're a print designer and you're only using software that's like 15 years old,
Mm-hmm.
um,
You
don't
have
do it.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a
Serious issues.
difference. Like we give each other a lot of slack,
Yeah.
for the how we approach a process, but there are limits to that. So,
Yes.
and using fireworks to me is one of those limits. Anyway, so speaking of all of this,
Yeah.
um, moving into prototyping,
Yeah.
the people interesting of the people who responded, pretty much everyone prototypes in. Well, 38% said that they prototype in HTML and CSS.
Mm-hmm.
18% said InVision, and
Mm-hmm.
11% said other, but they didn't specify what that means.
I don't
So
know.
we really don't know, and
Mm-hmm.
among those who selected HTML, CSS, freelancers led the pack, while those who worked for large studios or agencies were the scarcest. So that means that, other was 50%, and then a
Yeah.
freelancer was 46%.
Yeah.
And then startups were 24%, which is baffling to me.
Yes.
Um, and then technology 35, studio agencies
Mm-hmm.
at 40. So currently you work at a studio and I work at an IT company.
Yeah.
And so technically, I mean that's relative, most of the time we use HTML and CSS for
Mm-hmm.
prototyping. Well, I mean what is your take on all that?
It really depends. Like that these statistics, like especially for startup, the 24% is like super weird. Like it means that the majority of startups, they don't prototype. They don't do prototypes, and it's just like for me,
Yeah.
it's kind of mind blowing. Like
Yeah.
it's just weird. Anyway, like. prototype, I use HTML CSS because it's faster. I have like a pre-built library of transitions, animations, and HTML snippets of code that I can use pretty much to prototype
Hmm.
as quick as possible. I kind of see like InVision. We started actually the last project that we did for a huge company. We prototyped in InVision, but it's super limited because in InVision you just upload JPEGs and you can create transitions between JPEGs. So you can do
Hmm.
like a slide-in menu or a modal popover or a overlay status on top or if your JPEG. You have just like these 3-4 options and that's it. But it's interesting because most of the times like users or like your client doesn't understand um, the simplest thing ever. Like if I tap on the menu icon, the menu is gonna slide from the right. That's what they don't understand. And
Hmm.
you need to explain those specific, super like simple and small parts instead of like with HTML and CSS, you can do all sorts of transitions, animations, and loading and stuff. So something way more complicated, but
Yeah.
that probably your client doesn't need to understand. He needs to
Right.
understand a model, a popover, or a slide transition, or just an overlay takeover on top of the current design.
Yeah.
And InVision covers those basic things. So that's kind of interesting. Like your client doesn't need to see the full prototype, and you need to spend a lot of time in HTML, CSS to create a full prototype of the page to show
Yeah.
them every single transitions or stuff that you want to input inside the website, but they need to see just the basics transition and the basic stuff that their website is going to do. So that's I use both, and I kind of like I'm starting to understand why InVision, and InVision is like fully integrated with Sketch. You can export directly from Sketch to InVision. Basically, it's almost the same company.
Hmm.
They have a good relation and they are developing stuff for each other. So it's a really strong partnership.
It's interesting what you said about people not prototyping at all.
Yeah.
Germany actually answered the top five participants. Germany uses HTML and CSS for prototyping the most,
Mm-hmm.
while the United States uses it the least. So I
Oh
would
God.
dare
Yeah.
actually say that agrees with your opinion that people are just not prototyping.
Yeah.
Startups in the United States are not prototyping anywhere
Yeah.
near what they should be,
Mm-hmm.
which is if at all, which makes me wonder what the business process is for some of these startups,
Yeah.
if they're so concerned about their startup process that they're skipping steps. And
Yeah.
it really makes me wonder because that is skipping a step. Prototyping is a legit step, and you really cannot do. And even if you just made an HTML CSS prototype, you can upload it to a test server
Mm-hmm.
and send it to your client and say, here's a link, here's their specific link, click on it, click around, and then you can get on the phone and describe stuff to them or have them
Yeah.
sit down with you and actually demonstrate. To me, it's always been better to demonstrate to someone
Totally.
than
Yeah.
to say, well, it's going to be this, because you
Yeah.
cannot bank on somebody's. And it's not insulting any clients, but don't take that chance. Man, I would never recommend anybody take a chance on their client's imagination to accept what they're trying to explain. It's always just because these people are busy and they're sitting down with you and they're giving you their time. You know, just make the process as easy for them as possible. To
Yes,
give,
absolutely.
when they give you that 5 minutes, they feel like they're investing. There,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like, because here's the thing: once they start paying you, they feel like they need to get something back from their investment in you.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so, demonstrating a physical product means that they're actually getting something back already, for paying you for that time.
The super interesting thing is that exactly what you're saying, that they have to demonstrate something to the client or to investors. So it means that startup they don't prototype. So
Yeah.
they never demonstrate anything to the investors. They just release the product. And they don't have clients. Most of the time startups don't have clients. They just have that single product that they need to release as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And that's why there's this huge amount of failure in startups, because they just bashing on this code and they just destroying this trying to push as much as possible their product, but without a proper prototyping process, without a client that give you feedback, you're just by yourself. You're in a cave, you create your product, and you release you release it without testing, prototyping, feedback from a third party person.
And you know, you don't even have to invest in focus groups. You just need to invest in something. Invest in,
Yeah.
show it to people, because that's interesting. I don't know if you've ever watched Parks and Recreation,
Oh,
but
yes.
okay, so there's an episode where oh, what's his name? Aziz Ansari's
Oh,
character.
I don't remember.
Anyway,
Hmm.
he and John Ralphio create a startup, and they are spending enormous amounts of money in this huge rented space. They're paying models like 70,000 a year. They've got NBA basketball stars in there.
Hmm.
You know, just like they're talking about all of this money that they're spending, and they're like, "This is great. This is an amazing line." And then and so Adam's character comes in and he's like, well, "You guys are spending so much money on this," and they're like, "Yeah, but it's going to be worth it. And we're going to be rolling in all the money
Yeah.
whenever the product's finished." And it was hilarious, but
Hmm.
it's also a bit indicative about some of the stuff that we're seeing with startups. Not every
Yeah.
startup, of course. They're very successful startups. They sell for millions or billions of dollars.
Yeah.
But those are the startups that usually don't skip steps. They're the ones who do their homework. They do the math. They do the prototyping.
Yeah.
They do the focus groups. They use the invested money wisely, and those are the ones that, like Instagram.
Yes.
Instagram was a startup, and they sold it to Facebook, and they're all resting on multi-millions of dollars. But
Yeah.
they didn't. But the way they handled their company was very wisely, and
Hmm.
they were very methodical in the way that
Yeah.
they grow. They grew slowly.
Yeah.
They didn't give you 50,000 filters at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
They gave you a few filters, but it wasn't about the
Hmm.
filters. It was about you sharing a social network of photos of your day,
Hmm.
and they grew from that base. They didn't try
Yeah.
to be all end all, and that's when they sold for however much they sold. It
Hmm.
was a lot of money. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I think this is all really indicative of like the startup culture. Hey, I'm young and I'm gonna get a lot of money and I'm gonna be wealthy and I'm gonna be the next Instagram and all of this, and like that's great, and you can. See,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Yes, it can. Yes, you can. Um, but only if you play it by the rules, and only if you do it the right way.
Yes. Exactly.
Um, if you come and it's I read a lot of articles about the startups that they do well or they move to Silicon Valley and they tank,
Oh,
and they get
yes.
wrapped up in it's being wrapped up in the idea of, because Facebook was a startup too, and but they didn't get wrapped up in the idea of, I'm young, I'm going to be the next X person. They were like,
Hmm.
they said, because Facebook started out small. They were just like, just enter college,
Yeah.
just for colleges, and you have to have a university email, and that was pretty much it. I mean, the first Facebook profile. I mean, I joined in 2005,
Yeah.
and the first Facebook profiles were just so basic. Like you
Oh,
couldn't even
yes.
tell. Like people could just write on your wall because it was the giant text notepad. It was, you had to like sign your name, to let people know it was you that said something. And so it's changed so radically, but they were so basic in the way they started, and they were not apologetic for that,
Hmm.
and they didn't try to be something more. They built their base, and then they started building up, and that's what you see, because the whole point is not to study startups, it's to study startups that were successful.
Yeah.
You never look at all the people doing it. You only look at the people who've had consistent success rates, and you look at what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
don't get into the culture of, oh, I'm gonna get a startup and get famous.
Yeah.
You start with, I'm gonna get my core concept, and I'm gonna build on it.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that core concept is flexible enough to weather the time, because there
Yeah.
are several. I mean, I can't remember the names of it, but there are always the startups who seemed okay, and they
Hmm.
seemed like they were going to do really well, and then they
Yeah.
tank and they
Yes.
disappear, and you
Absolutely.
never hear from them again.
Yeah. Totally. And we
So
should like strip the whole idea that you prototype just if you have a client and you have to
yeah,
show what you're doing to a client. Yeah,
yeah,
like prototyping puts you in a position that you question yourself and
Yes.
you actually seen the product while is in development, and you
Yeah.
actually see the flaws of your product. So prototyping is like, I think it's 50-50. It's like 50% is important for you, for yourself, and 50% is important for the client.
Yeah.
But we
And
shouldn't
future
strip it
customers.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we shouldn't put it away, like remove it from the process just because we don't have a client. We are a startup and we have our own product. That's
Yeah.
not how it works, and it's not how it should work.
Yeah.
So,
No one ever becomes. There's really no one who ever becomes truly successful by skipping steps.
yes,
You can
exactly.
become rich quick, but that doesn't mean your riches are going to last
Hmm.
if you start skipping steps.
Yeah.
And so, we've all seen flashes in the pan. The articles being written by someone who's the next Bill Gates, the articles being written by the next startup, the next Facebook, the next this, the next
Yeah.
that. But the problem was that there's a lot of stuff goes into startups. But one of the things, man, why don't you let your problems be that people's perception of your brand and work on your brand, but have a solid product? Like product first, brand second. Your brand
Yes.
grows from your product, not your product grows from your brand, because that's what we're seeing with Apple. We're seeing Apple banking on its brand and not its product, which is a
Hmm.
reversal of what it used to do.
Yeah.
And Instagram, product first, branding. Branding
Yeah.
grew from the product. Facebook, product first, branding. MySpace, branding, product.
Yeah, now is we're kind of transitioning from that. I remember like 3-4 years ago, if you wanted to be a startup, you needed a mascot. Like you needed like
Yeah.
a stuffed, like a puppet animal,
And
that it
pictures
was
of
like
your
the
office.
representation of
Yeah.
your product or your startup. And without that,
Yeah.
you're not an actual startup, because
Yeah.
you need to have a mascot or an icon or a logo that you can
Yeah.
create stuffed animals with that.
Yeah.
It's like,
So I
ah,
don't know if you remember the movie That Thing You Do. It's interesting because the whole point of that movie in the
mm-hmm.
90s was that they were called originally they called themselves the Wonders, but it was ONE, so it sounded like they were calling themselves the Oneaters,
Yeah.
because of their misspelling. They had bad branding, but they had good music. And eventually
Yes.
they were picked up by a large music producer who
Mm-hmm.
said, "Okay, your stuff is good. Don't worry about that. Change the name to the Wonders, the Wonders."
Yeah.
And so he fixed their branding once they became good enough with their product.
Uh-huh.
So you can have a semi-workable brand, but a
Yeah.
really good product. Your brand
Yeah.
doesn't have to be perfect. Your brand's going to evolve. It's always going to
Yeah.
grow. It's like a plant, and so just water it the right way. Don't poison it. But one of the ways you don't poison it is having a good product.
Yeah.
So consistency, like consistently having a good product will always
Yes,
will
exactly.
bring you success. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that people don't talk about because everyone wants to be Zuckerberg. See, that's one thing I'm seeing. Everyone wants to be the next Zuckerberg, but
Mm-hmm.
Zuckerberg worked really hard and had a consistently good product. That's why he is where he is today.
Yeah.
He just kept consistently making better stuff. And then he hired people to help him make better stuff. And it's the steps. It's always steps because even though he attained it while being young, he still did it the right way. Like
Yeah. Kind
he
of.
still got
Mm-hmm.
he properly used his investments and took a step up. He properly used investments, took a step up, and that he ran the business well. Even if people don't like Zuckerberg, did the steps. Everyone successful always uses those small business steps and works. Regardless of their personal views.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point is business still runs on rules, and if you work the system correctly, if you not work the system, but if you are in the system playing by the rules
Yeah.
and using wisdom in the way you grow, then it's just going to be one consistent brand jump after another.
Yeah.
So anyway, interesting that the website says it's the Wild West for managing the files that the designers generate. Dropbox is the clear winner. 51% responded that they use Dropbox for version control,
Yeah.
while 39% said GitHub and 30% said Google Drive, which
Mm-hmm.
one of these things is not like the other. Um,
Yes.
there's a radical difference between GitHub and Dropbox
Yeah.
and Google Drive. Um,
Yeah.
Most importantly, because neither Google Drive or Dropbox are version control softwares. Like
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
user, it's a user drag and drop online,
It's just
basically.
a cloud
Yeah,
storage. It's not like version control storage.
it's
So
it's
it's Yeah, I think like 51% is said Dropbox are just designers, and
Yeah,
39% is a GitHub just developers. It's just like the
yeah.
separation.
I'm pretty sure we could just go ahead and put the top ones as being Dropbox and GitHub. GitHub for
Yes.
developers, and then Dropbox for designers. Because any
Yeah.
design work that I do, I'm chucking that thing into Dropbox. I've used Dropbox since
Hmm.
like 2011 for client work. I mean,
Yeah.
I was illustrating a children's book for someone, um, and I just dropped all the files into Dropbox. It was just
Hmm.
very easy, super
Yeah.
super easy. But I would not do that for code at all. Like
No, that
you and I
doesn't
are
really
not
make
using,
sense.
you and I are developing some stuff,
Yeah.
and we're not going to use Dropbox for that.
No, it's
There's
just
just
you
no way.
open a private repository in
Yeah,
Bitbucket or GitHub if you want to
yeah.
buy a private one, and that's it. Uh, Dropbox, I mean, it's kind of weird because I'm slowly losing faith in Dropbox because it's slowly like Dropbox started at 10 gigs of free space, and then you could improve, like buy more space, and
Mhm.
then they start like removing slowly space. Now the free version is like 3 gigabytes, that's it.
Mhm.
And if you have a company and you want like more space and more users on the same Dropbox installation, you need to spend at least $1,000 per month or something like that, because it's really expensive and you never have unlimited space. Never. Like
Well,
there's no.
yeah,
Hmm?
I think at this point, what I'm doing is I have the business plan, or not the
Yeah.
business plan. I have at least the next step up, which is like a terabyte, for
Yeah, the
like 10 or
personal.
20. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just tend to use that. But yeah, if you're using a company, see, here's the thing: if you're using a company and all of your people are using your company drive, you will either need to have someone at the end of the month clean out everything and archive it faithfully, or
It's
you
never
need to
gonna
have,
happen.
yeah, or you need to go ahead and just get for the, get the biggest Dropbox you possibly can.
Hmm.
And if you're a design agency, it does not take a lot. As whenever you're working in Illustrator and Photoshop,
Yeah.
files can run into at least 200 gig, 200 megs very, very easily. For a
Yeah.
small thing.
Also 1 gig. You can easily reach one
Oh yeah.
gig.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Super easy. With
Yeah. No.
illustration. A complex illustration can easily be a gig, if not more. I
Hmm.
mean, I've worked on 2 and 3 gig files before.
Yes.
And it's
Exactly.
just more of a complex illustration. I've never
Hmm.
done more than 3 gigs, but
Yeah.
I think if you're doing like 10 gigs of art on a single illustration, you're either doing something like amazing, like the Sistine Chapel, or
Yes.
you're doing something wrong. So,
Or you never delete a single layer, even if you're not using it.
yeah, or you're not combining layers that should be
Yeah.
combined,
No.
something like that. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, well, in Germany, Germany and Canada use Dropbox the most, and US is
Yeah.
third.
Hmm.
So, that makes sense. Looks like Germany really, man, they really answered a lot of questions. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's
it's
the kind of the
interesting.
core, the core of the Europe. Like most, Berlin especially, there are a lot of startups and a lot of like digital agencies are there. So
Yeah. Well, and
makes
it's
sense.
interesting. This website also says that GitHub, okay, smaller studios and agencies and freelancers are using it. 50% of people said, 50% of startups said that they use GitHub.
Yeah.
Media and freelance also said GitHub, but it's in technology is 38%. But again, we're all talking. I think it goes back to what you were saying. We're all talking about developers. We're not talking about designers.
Yeah.
Designers are not using. I can pretty much. I mean, I would be surprised if designers were using GitHub for
No,
storage.
that's
It
insane.
seems
That's
ridiculous.
yeah.
I mean, especially for design files. I'm not gonna. No, 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 no.
No, no.
Uh, so anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. But it was really
Yeah.
interesting. It kind of gives you a feel for where the industry is headed.
Hmm.
Now, I wish we had more participants than 4,000. I
Yeah.
mean, if we had about 20,000 participants, you could really get a solid
Hmm.
feeling either way.
Yeah.
Um, but it gives you the sense of where Germany and the United States and Canada are going, at least.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's a sort of like consistency. Like it's not the answer were not super like all over the place, like with
yeah.
different softwares or something like you never heard about it. everyone is going in the same direction, and everyone ends up using kind of the same software, kind of the same solutions for the same problem. So is it like because these products are good, or because we don't have valid alternatives? That's
I think most of the time it's the latter. No, I'm joking. I'm joking,
yeah.
but not really.
Hmm.
I think we're always see. It goes back to what we were talking about before. I think we're
Hmm.
always looking out for the better thing, and
Yeah.
whatever happens to come our way, we'll go for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll use that. We'll use everything that we're using without fail until something better comes along. Then we'll switch.
Exactly.
Because the whole point is, at the end of the day, the clients don't care what you use or how you use it. They
Yeah.
just care about the end product. And the faster you can get a good, solid end product to them, the
Yes.
more money you make and the more consistent your
Hmm.
business is and the better your business is. And basically, we're all, you know, um, to fight over, if everyone's farming and someone
Yeah.
fights over which ox is better or
Yeah.
which tool is better, I mean, if it's the same type of tool, and they do the same thing but just a little differently.
Hmm.
I mean, there's not a big difference. Why are you spending your time complaining about it and not spending your time using it?
Yeah.
Like why? I never got that. I guess I'm more pragmatic in that respect. But I think most of us, and that's why you don't see a lot of infighting with developers, because we are all in the same boat. we,
Yeah,
uh,
we're
uh,
all stressed about our
yeah,
life. Our
yeah.
life is
It's
miserable, so let's be
yeah.
friends.
Well, and that's one thing I noticed with I transitioned from web developers into um, a certain type of artist a few years
Hmm.
ago, and there's so much infighting and there's so much
Yeah.
opinionated, like posturing and angry stuff, and it was such a miserable experience, and I've kind of left them and gone back to developers. And man, oh my gosh, everyone's so nice and humble and polite, and even the people who
Yeah.
have this vast superior repository of knowledge in their head,
Yeah.
they're so nice and they're so
Yeah.
friendly and helpful. And I missed it, and I'm so glad to be back. And it's
Yeah, we're the best. I know. Yeah,
yeah,
we're
totally,
the best kind of people.
totally. I think it's because everybody has stressful lives
Oh
and
my God.
stressful day jobs, and we just don't want to deal with it when we come home. We're just like, yeah,
Yeah,
let's talk
exactly.
about fun stuff. Let's talk about Red Tornado,
Oh no.
the Rangers.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I mean, that's because that's us not dealing with our daily issues of
Yeah, no, exactly.
crazy stuff.
Hmm.
But I mean, and it's interesting that we're talking about this because one thing that we're all, I think, dealing with and have been dealing with for a while is the responsive image issue. Um, and I think one of us sent this article to the others. It's a web designer. It's from webdesignernews.com, which
Yeah.
is great. But it's the anatomy of responsive images.
Yeah.
Um, it's just chronicling our struggle to use responsive images in a website.
Yes.
Um, they're
I kind of I really admire this user. Like Jake is the owner of the like Jake Archibald wrote this article, and it's like, okay, you're a genius because you figured that out and you figured your process out, and it's working, and you can create fixes with various density, different images for different devices, different resolution, and whatever. You have like full control on size, quality, and orientation of every image for every single device. And it's great. Thank you for sharing this. But I'm sorry, I'm not going to use it because it's insane. It's just like, of course, we're not going to go through all the entire article, but basically, it's just you have the final results that you should have in your HTML file is
yeah.
the HTML5 picture element, then the source media element, and the image HTML standard element. And
Mhm.
inside that, you have different options, different attributes, that is media, source sets, sizes, and you have to create different version of the same file for every
Mhm.
different iteration. You can use media queries inside your source element, and it's just so convoluted and it's just so terrible that
Mhm.
you need, like, first, you're gonna hate yourself, absolutely. Like,
Mhm.
it's just not gonna work. And second, you cannot, I mean, you can, but imagine doing this for every single images. You cannot write it manually. So you need a framework that has to do this for you.
Hmm. Well, and he's even doing stuff like putting a media query inside the picture element.
Yeah.
Um, I I know it needs to be like here. My thing about responsive images is this, and I again tend to be more pragmatic of basically what does the client need and what
Mm-hmm.
does the client require, who are the clients, what is their, because when you work in it long enough you kind of know that if you're working with the medical industry you're going to be dealing with a lot of IE users and
Yeah.
a lot of ES users. But if you deal with a more artsy website like an arts website, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to have more Chrome users probably, or
Yeah.
Firefox or Safari,
Yeah.
because you're going to have people who have iPads looking at it. You're going to have people who have Macs and non-standard PCs looking at it. You'll still have
Mm-hmm.
IE, but it won't be the maximum.
Yeah.
So you'll tend to, now it's more Chrome now than anything, but even so, like you'll kind of gauge what you'll need, and you can kind of alter your code accordingly.
Yeah.
What is the main thing? Because a lot of times, if you're on a budget, you don't exactly have time to do this stuff for everything, and sometimes you do need to cut some corners. And I think I may be wrong in this, but I feel like all code is dependent on the client's needs. Um,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
there's basic stuff that everybody needs and that you're going to have to do with responsive code. I mean, period. You
Mm-hmm.
just are going to have to do it. But
Yeah, sure.
uh, you know, I think,
But this is crazy.
yeah, I look at this and my eyes cross, and just like, I know this is probably needed, but I think there's some stuff in here that we don't, because what he's doing is he's got the picture and then he's got a media query inside of the picture element, which I think
Mm-hmm.
um, Bootstrap 3, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already on 4 already. Yeah,
Let's
get it out,
jump
get it
ahead.
out. Let's jump. Bootstrap 3 doesn't really deal with the media queries in the same way that Bootstrap 2 did.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, it's kind of, I mean, am I wrong? Am I wrong in thinking that this is really more friendly to Bootstrap 2 than 3? Or is it,
Yeah, kind
I
of.
don't know.
Well, I think it's just an example. Like you can, of course,
Yeah.
write the media queries that you want, but the problem here is that okay, how you're gonna write those media queries? It's gonna be like a manual process that your media queries, and you're gonna put it inside
See, exactly.
the
That's what I'm talking
media
about.
attribute,
Yeah.
or like what happen if almost at the end of the project of the website you add a new media query. You have
Mhm.
to go through all the images that you created and add a new media query and a new derivation of the picture.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So that's why I'm saying like you cannot. This is great. This is amazing because you can cover everything and you can actually manage the speed and performance of your website in on every aspect. But this is not human. Like
Yeah.
you need a framework, you need a software that generates for you all the derivations that you need.
Right.
Otherwise, you're gonna spend like half of your time just editing, exporting, and creating different derivation of the same image for different devices, and you can't. It's not like there's no budget for that. Like no client is gonna approve um, a budget for like 15 hours of image optimization for Internet Explorer. It's not never gonna
Yes.
happen. So
Well, and most of the time, whenever you bill clients, you explain to them what you did during those hours,
yeah.
and that's required. And it's what I do personally. It's what I do otherwise. Um, you know, when you send someone an invoice, you need to let them know what you did, how long it took to do it, and how your time was. Especially if you're working in an agency or any
Mm-hmm.
kind of company, you're going to be sending an invoice, and the invoice is going to detail everything you do.
Yeah.
And the more detailed the better. But if they look at the invoice and say, oh, I have a 20-hour budget, but an hour of this 20-hour budget was spent on just images that I sent you, you
Yeah,
know
exactly.
you're going to have a lot to explain. And it gets to the point where we're really running into an issue of productivity here.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when you're on a budget, and when you have like even a long-term client, let's say you have a long-term client
Yeah.
loves you, client needs a quick website, but they say go ahead and forego the image optimization, or
Yes.
you've never done it. it's not a good idea to start with them. Always start out like you would have to start out with a new client,
Yeah.
who is used to the image optimization, not a client that you either inherited or you has been with your company or another company for a long time, and they're
Yeah.
used to things being done a certain way. Or someone who's had like multiple websites done over the years.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, image optimization, and you're spending an hour of my billable time, which could be anywhere from however many hundreds an hour.
Hmm.
You know, uh, Even if it's down to 50 an hour, you're like, why did I pay $50 for this? Let's say it's
Yes.
the lowest common denominator, and you're charging him like $40 or $50. Like, why did I
Yeah.
just pay $50 for this? Like, you have to. I don't know. I mean, there's a point where it really becomes the developer and the designer, well, the developers, kind of um, prerogative to
Yeah.
see how they choose to approach this situation.
Yeah, I mean it's an amazing solution. It's an amazing technical skill and like snippet of code, but for sure it's not going to be the definitive one because there are other options, and especially this example that this user is showing is on a perfect world, like on a perfect environment. You
Mm-hmm.
can use fixed pixel width, and
Right.
that's never gonna happen
Right.
because if you have a content managed system like where the user can upload his own
Mm-hmm.
pictures, you cannot manage those parts. You cannot create a code with a fixed pixel width and height or a fixed pixel density because it's never gonna have it. You don't have full control on this stuff. Like so, this example works perfectly in this perfectly controlled environment that he created, but in the real world is just it's not gonna work. It's not gonna happen, and you're gonna spend a lot of time to create all these different iterations, and then the client is gonna upload his own picture, and it's gonna destroy all your work. So it's
Right.
just
Or yeah, and that also, yeah, it completely negates either the issue of users uploading their own pictures or users deciding last minute. See, if you do this, it's got to be last minute. Like, it's got to be the last thing you do because um, let's say you go through and you optimize all of the images, and then they
yeah,
decide that they want a completely different layout.
yeah.
How many times have we done that? How many times have any of us, anybody who's listening, or either of us, we do
Yeah.
a product, we do a project, and then the client decides either through forces that they can't control, like somebody, upper level management decides they want to change it, or they decide, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. If the client decides they want to change it, that you need to change it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if you've already billed them an hour for image optimization, you're going to bill them another one for completely changing everything over
Yeah.
and testing, and doing all that. So you're looking at an exponential increase of hours if that doesn't if you do it too early in the system. Because I've heard of stories of people who have optimized everything within the first version of it, and then the client decides they want to change something, and so they
Yeah.
have to go back from to scratch. That's why you kind of always work from like core out.
Yeah.
You make sure that they like this, then you move up. Then you make sure they like that, then you move up. Then at the end, you optimize everything. Because it's like a solid chunk
Yeah.
of project now. It's not just something that's gonna change. And so
Yeah.
that's why it's whenever I talk to any clients, and I've always done this out of college, I always get them to get the framework or the frame of their project done first
Hmm.
with functionality, and then we move on
Yes.
to design. And design comes later. Design
Yeah.
it works in tandem, but it's still just you always want to make sure that your website's going to do what the client wants first.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
if you're developing all this functionality in your images first, then it's going to completely screw over your project, and you're looking at another probable 5 hours over budget, which is inconceivable.
Yes.
Period. Like 1 hour over budget is bad,
Yeah.
but
No.
then like because I've heard of some people going 10 hours over budget, and it's I mean the client just becomes furious at that point. They're
Oh
like,
yes, of course.
you're doubling what I'm paying you, blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And that's why you take all the steps. That's why we take all the steps we take to not do that.
Yes.
So because we want them to be happy, or we want to say that we've come under budget. The best thing a client
Yeah.
can hear is that they hired you for 20 hours and you got it done in 10 or 15.
Yes.
Like
Totally.
usually doesn't happen in 10, but 15 If you can get it done in 15, they're like, oh wow, this is great, and you've got their
Hmm.
business. You've got it. You're done,
Yeah.
and you're good for the next like 3 or 4 or 5 projects. So,
Yes.
which could be like 10 years. You never
Yeah,
know. So
absolutely. Yeah, long-term relationship with a good client, it's always good. And
yeah.
yeah, no, it's a tricky one. The thing that I like, maybe like to conclude, the thing that I totally don't like is that we're trying to move into like a web environment that is unique and is just solid, and you
Hmm.
have to do less and less to have the same results on different platforms. So also Microsoft Edge is slowly dropping MS dash extensions for transitions and animation. Also,
Yeah.
Chrome started with a WebKit engine. Now you don't have to use the WebKit engine anymore. You can just use standard transition or translate 3D and stuff. So
Hmm.
we are moving to towards that direction of like unifying the code that we have to use that is going to work on every platform. So
Hmm.
why for images we still have to do 10,000 different iterations
Yes.
to make it compatible with
Yeah.
everything? And of
Yeah.
course, like this part is not going to work on browsers on mobile, on smartphones, because
Right.
they have a totally different like concept, and uh, it's just it's god awful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping that eventually this gets solved, and there's some sort of, I don't know how they would do it, but there's some sort of way that they could, I don't know, fix it.
Yeah, please.
Please make less work for us, because it's not that anyone's saying that they're lazy. It's just, man, we've got clients and they've got budgets, and
Yeah,
we just don't have time to do. We physically do not have the time in our
yeah,
budgets to do all of this in a perfect environment. So, and a lot of us always have those things that we did in projects that we're like, oh, let's not talk about that. You know,
yes.
we're just, if
And
somebody looks at it and goes, "Who did that?" We would say, "We don't know who did that." They're like one of the worst projects I did. I just, it was when I was first starting out. It ended up just not working for multiple
uh-huh.
reasons. And someone was like, "Man, who did that?" And I was like, "I know, right? That's just all. Ugh. I don't know what
Yeah.
they were thinking. It was probably, I don't know. They could have had a bad client, but you never know. You just never know."
Yeah,
The
exactly.
best thing about doing client work is you can always disavow it, and you can always disown it if it doesn't work. And it wasn't a bad project; it just didn't turn out the way that I
Yeah.
thought it was going to. It's never happened to anybody else. Um, but
No.
everyone was perfect, Michael. Whatever.
Exactly.
Um, cool. So yeah, Facebook has come out with. Let's see. They have come out with well, they're about to come out with something for work. It
Hmm.
is like Facebook, but for work. And
It's great, right?
yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work out. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we saw also on the survey before, like project manager, project management software are like there are a lot of those software around, and no one is the definitive one. Everyone is trying to create a new one, but now a lot of people uses Slack, but Slack is more like chat based. It's hard to manage projects, so you use Slack together with Basecamp, and Basecamp is more project manager, but it's a awful checkbox and check marks and to-do list management. So sometimes you add Asana, or sometimes you just use Trello for project management. It's just a lot of different options, a lot of different softwares, and the only problem with all these options that every time you start working into a company, you have to learn those softwares, and
Mhm.
most of the times it's not always the same software. So you are in a company and you use Slack, you change your job, you go into another company and they use Trello or Asana, so you have to learn from scratch a new piece of software, a new
Mhm.
platform. Facebook is kind of like they're seeing an opportunity there because everyone uses Facebook, or everyone know how to use Facebook.
Mhm.
So like the hours spent on like training for this software is basically zero. So just okay, we're gonna do our project management on Facebook. That's it. Just everyone knows this, and no brainer at all. We're gonna start just using it right now. The problem is that first, a lot of company, even if we are in 2015, still blocks Facebook
Yeah.
on their intranet. They block their access. The other problem is that right now, like how many time a company, like a business, releases a tweet that it's actually was written by a single person that forgot to switch their account from private to the company one. So
Yes.
just releasing a private tweet, maybe with a really compromising picture on the
Oh,
company's Twitter feed.
American
And
Airlines.
exactly. And how many times that is going to happen on your Facebook? It's
Hmm.
Facebook to maintain this familiarity and this consistency is going to maintain the same graphic interface, maybe with just the logo of your company customized. How many of users, how many of like your employees are going to post private stuff on the public Facebook or public stuff on the private company's Facebook?
Yeah, I there would have to be a good divide. I mean, and what you were saying about the zero training. I mean, Ryan Holmes, the CEO of Hootsuite, said the same thing, and I
Yeah.
agree. I mean, most Facebook users are now the population of a moderately medium-sized European country,
Yeah.
um, if not larger.
Hmm.
Um, but that was interesting because I've never worked in a company that has blocked Facebook before.
Yeah.
However, I've always worked in web companies, so
Yes.
Facebook is important. And currently, I do well. I do a lot of SEO, like social media stuff for my for
Yes.
company now. So I
Hmm.
have I have admin access to the Facebook account
Hmm.
and all of that. But even so, I'm super, super, super careful about what I tweet and when I tweet it.
Hmm.
Um, I don't ever tweet anything controversial normally, personally. I don't tweet any compromising anything, but even so, I'm still very careful about what goes on my personal accounts versus versus company accounts because,
Yes.
and that's the plight of anybody who works with SEO because all of it is connected to your Twitter app, all of it's connected to your Facebook page, and
Yes.
sometimes on Facebook mobile, you don't necessarily see what you're posting as. Now, I've never posted as a company. I've never ever posted anything as a company um, on Facebook or Twitter, but I have seen that happen, and it
Yes.
is it is difficult. And sometimes, you know, Facebook used to have a thing where you could use all of Facebook, including your own Facebook, as a company.
Hmm.
And there was one time because I've got Cambria Comics, I switched over to it at the time and ended up replying on someone of my friends' status as Cambria Comics,
Yeah.
and I just deleted it. It's not a big deal. It was my personal company, and they knew me.
Hmm.
But still, I mean, what if that had been an actual public company?
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything.
Exactly.
I was just like, "Oh, that looks awesome! Congratulations!"
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a big chance for that kind of problem.
Yes.
Um,
Totally.
but I mean, it depends on the company culture too.
Yeah. No. No.
I mean, the
Absolutely.
companies I think we both work at are pretty open to.
Hmm.
If anything, it helps in some ways. It does help productivity because you're able to connect with people, or if someone's working from home, you can just chat them up, and
The,
it's
the the
it's
other the other thing that is like threw me off a little bit is like, especially when you need a project management software, is something that has to be like kind of private. So you need that EULA, or you need that like terms and conditions from that specific product, that whatever you're gonna share on that product is not gonna be used by anyone. It's just internally for you, your company, because it's your project. You're managing your project, or you're managing private parts of projects that you don't want to share with the rest of the world.
yeah.
And Facebook, as we all know, it's like all about selling your informations to
Uh-huh.
NSA or whatever other private company or public infrastructure is asking for your information. So is it gonna do the same with my public account? Like, I'm on Facebook, I know that whatever I write on Facebook is just publicly accessible by everyone. They know
Yeah.
my first and last name, there's my picture, they can, like, NSA or whatever other public company, they can access there and
Mm-hmm.
read all my shit. I don't care. It's just stupid public things. But in a company that is developing an important project, how safe and how can Facebook guarantee that they're not gonna use those information for themselves, like to do experimentation, to do like social experiments, or try to share it with other companies. They stated that they're not gonna use advertising in work in Facebook for work, but still I don't trust them. I don't
No, I
really
would
trust
not
them.
ever advocate to anybody to do that because of their propensity to control and sell information and social experiments.
Yeah.
I don't believe any business has any kind of investment uh, in a social experiment performed without their knowledge on their company.
Yes.
You know, like especially when you're dealing with time sensitive projects.
Yes.
Absolutely not. I mean, if I was running a mid level or a large company, I'd be like, no, we're not using that. We're using Slack, or
Mm-hmm.
we're using something else. We're not using Facebook, which has shown that it has not it because it shows that it has no remorse
Mm-hmm.
for performing those experiments. I
Yeah.
mean, why were they performing a social experiment? Who did this? There's still answers. There's still questions that they're not answering,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still this bizarre attitude of we have the power, so we can do this.
Yeah.
Um, as long as they have that, companies are going to look at them and go, no. I've invested money. I have investors. I have board members, and I have people who are in the real world, and we're not going to let you high five your way into ruining us because you decide to perform a social experiment by withholding time sensitive information. You know, like I just they need to clean up their brand a little bit before they
Yes,
can be
absolutely.
trusted with business. I know there are going to be a few people at startups who are going to use it and be like, we're using Facebook, and they'll like make articles and stuff like that. But as you
Mm-hmm.
know, articles don't always necessarily guarantee the longevity of the person being covered.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I agree. I think they've got a long way to go. And I would not guarantee it for any business because there's no promise from them that they won't do that again
Yeah,
or that they
exactly.
won't, especially if anybody has, because there have also been rumors about them allowing certain hate groups to exist on
Yeah.
Facebook and not allowing other certain type of hate groups to exist,
Yeah.
and they're basically picking and choosing, and especially the
Mm-hmm.
issue with them destroying or deleting Native American profiles because
Yeah.
they didn't believe their names were real.
Yes.
And so you have like people whose name are legally like Black Bear.
Mm-hmm.
That is their given tribal name. That is their legal name in the United States. Okay, in the United States, their legal name is
Mm-hmm.
Brown Bear or Black
Yeah.
Bear. And Facebook comes along, and whatever intern is in charge of it decides that, oh, that's not a real name, deleting the account.
Mm-hmm.
They had to be sued before they would release it. And
Yeah.
so
I know.
I don't trust these people's judgment to say,
Yeah. No.
well,
Exactly.
your business name doesn't sound real, so we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
delete it. I mean, and if you have a considerable investment to move everybody away from Slack and move everybody to this, and it's gone because they don't think, you know, cute C Designs is a real name,
Yeah.
even though you're like a mid-level company.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't trust. I don't trust it. I
Yeah, no, I
absolutely.
mean, for sure they're gonna have some like policy for like they have to know that a company
Right.
name is like a totally made up name. It doesn't make sense. So they should have like, for sure they're gonna have a policy to allow whatever name if it's not offensive or whatever like in your company. But
Right. Right.
it's like, do you trust them? Like
Yeah.
do
I
you
don't.
they're gonna have access to wherever you're writing, whatever. And I know
Yeah.
it's happening.
And they'll have access to insider
Yeah, and I
information.
know it's happening also on Slack. Like I know that all the
Yeah.
messaging in Slack are archived in the Slack company's databases and stuff, but Slack has a really strict terms and condition that you can read
Yeah.
and says we're not gonna sell your stuff, we're not gonna use your stuff. Like you have the ability to delete completely everything from the face of the earth and no backups, nothing.
Yeah.
With Facebook, we all know that you can't. Even if you delete it, it's gonna always be there. They're gonna always
Yeah.
have a backup forever
Yeah.
of your company stuff or your project, of your secret
Trade
uh,
secrets.
Yeah.
That's the
Wow.
most concerning thing to me. If trade secrets and financial information is going to be exchanged through Facebook Business, and
Yeah.
Facebook will always have that information.
Yeah. It's gonna be
Period.
someone reading those stuff all day long.
Oh, you made such and such quarterly, ads start showing up, or where you start getting bizarre notifications from people who should not know how much you make, saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, it seems like you've made above $10,000 in your last quarter.
Mm-hmm.
For a small company, that's great.
Yeah.
Here, we've been notified by a third party that we should, um, offer you our services." And the only
Yeah.
way they could have gotten that information is through Facebook. Facebook
Yeah.
selling that information of your quarterly profits to another
Mm-hmm.
company, which is terrifying.
Yes.
So
It's really terrifying. It's
if you
just
have a company, like I don't know, we'll see how it goes. We'll see. It's still in
yeah.
its
We'll
infancy.
see.
It's still in beta. So
Yeah, for
they
sure.
may.
There's gonna be a lot of issues with like, oh, I thought I posted on my personal profile instead it's on Facebook for work, and you're gonna get fired because you wrote like,
Mhm.
oh, my boss is an asshole on your Facebook for
Yeah.
work.
See, I'm friends with pretty much everybody at my job, so that's one good thing about working in a smaller company is that
Hmm.
you're all connected with each other all the time. I mean,
Yes.
nobody in their right mind would say that anyway. So even if their
Yeah. No.
boss was a
Totally.
jerk. So I've had bad bosses in the past, but man,
Hmm.
I love my current boss, but bad bosses in the past, I would never even.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody with a motive with a sense of, um, I don't know, common knowledge or common sense would
Hmm.
know that you deal with your emotions privately. If somebody pisses you off, anybody in the company pisses you off, any client pisses you off, you deal with it like an adult, and then you move on. You don't go,
I
I hate everybody. Everybody's an asshole. I don't
It's
care. Blah, blah,
never
blah, blah.
gonna happen.
Yeah.
we are we are too childish for like
Yeah.
we're
Well,
not.
actually, it's probably a good thing for the boss to know which people in their company is talking
Yeah.
smack about everybody else. So
Exactly.
we'll weed them out faster. So people with no, but you're probably gonna get those people who don't know how to use Facebook being like, "Oh, okay, honey, tell grandma how your day was." And you're like, "Oh no, this is
Yes.
on the company. How do I delete this? Delete, 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 delete," and like all these messages of like, "I can't figure this out."
Yeah,
No, that'll be
exactly.
funny. But yeah, I
It'd
would
be
think
fun.
I would think anybody in this day and age who uses social media would be able to. Most people who
Hmm.
last longer than 10
Yeah.
years in their
Yes.
field, in any field, and working, um, would know that if you have a problem with any part of your company, you deal with the person, you talk to the person, or you try to resolve the issue as an adult. You don't go and complain about it on social media because whatever you share on social media is like telling a crowd. Eventually, someone's going to know someone that you're talking about.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's why I'm much more careful about the stories I share now because I try
Hmm.
to make them as general as possible
Yes.
because I don't want anybody to think. Because even if I'm telling a funny story, I'm not. First of all, I don't share client stories.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Sure.
None of us. We can
Hmm.
tell each other individually, but never
Yeah.
never here. But it just goes with the amount of discretion that you have with your life, and I think
Yes.
most adults should have the discretion to not air their work grievances on social media, regardless. I mean, even if someone was having a bad day and they talk to you in a bad way because we're all human,
Yeah.
that's the worst opportunity. The worst thing you can do is go to social media and be like, someone was rude to me, that jerk. When they could have just been having a bad day and they come back and apologize like 30 minutes later and then
Hmm.
like buy you coffee or something. Like
Yeah.
saying anything on the in the heat of the moment is like the worst thing to do ever. So,
Absolutely.
guys, never ever ever share information
No.
from work on Facebook.
And
So,
and don't use Facebook for work.
and don't use Facebook. Yeah, not yet. It's still in beta.
Oh,
Good change, but
yeah.
right now it's like, nah, let's
Yeah.
not do that.
Mhm.
So anyway, so yeah, I think that concludes our. We have a
Yeah.
great thing we're going to talk about next week, which
Hmm.
is different CSS frameworks. So there's some fun stuff that we kind of came across this week.
Yeah.
We were gonna cover it this week, but we decided that it's so good that we want to cover it, and we want to be able to test out some of these
Yeah.
CSS frameworks. So it's going
We
to be a
need to
good.
do actual. We need to do actual homework. So
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some
we're
testing.
not gonna be as lazy as usual, but we're gonna do some
Yeah, we
interesting
skimmed it.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, we're gonna do some homework and get back to you guys and kind of we're gonna look at testing other frameworks besides
Hmm.
Bootstrap, which are CSS frameworks. We're gonna test them and give you our results next week. So we'll tell
Amazing.
you what works and what doesn't. And so, whatever part of the week that you're in while listening to this, have a great rest of your week. Know that the weekend is so much faster. It's coming so much faster than you think, and blink and it'll be here. So keep working for the weekend. Keep having fun in what you're doing. So, and we'll see you guys later.